Welcome to the Empower Me Show with Pam Bright. This show is all about honoring you as a spiritual being, having a human experience. You are here for a reason, and it's no mistake that you are here on earth right now. Spirit has guided you to this very moment in time, so you could hear the messages Pam is about to share with you. She is a multidimensional healer, light language channel, transformation coach, wife and mother, committed to helping you discover the tools and practices to empower you to live the best life you can. You get to choose the spirit path you take. You can connect to the spiritual guidance already all around you. Get ready to live a fully empowered life. This is the Empower Me Show.
And welcome back to another episode of the Empower Me Show. My name is Pam Bright. I am your hostess today, and I'm here with my very special guest, Cheryl Clark, who is going to tell us an amazing story for you today. Storytelling is a really powerful way of really getting into the meat and potatoes, if you will, of our lives so that we can kind of get a different perspective sometimes of what's happened, who we are, and what new decisions we can make from the stories that we tell ourselves, as well as the stories that we tell others. So today we're going to listen to Cheryl's adventure in her life and really how that has skewed or kind of changed the way that she's lived her life in a way that empowers her to live more fully. And that's what this show is all about, is empowerment and self-praise and self-control of your destiny. So you get to choose the life that you live today. And that's what our show is all about today. And as always, I really like to center ourselves because that helps me as a hostess, but also helps you to kind of separate yourself from all the noise of life that might have transpired up until this point in time. So I've got my trusty rattle here for you. And if you don't know, I'll let you know that a rattle actually helps to clear any excessive energies that might be in the way of really honing in on the heart and the soul of you. And it lets all the other gunk kind of leave your body system. So I'm just going to do a little bit of that for you. I recommend, if you don't have a rattle or a drum or some kind of a noisemaker, that you actually get one for yourself, because that helps to break up all the density that we tend to carry around with us as human beings on this planet having this grand adventure. So I'm also going to use a little light language to ground in that newness of soul and a body together as one. And allow yourself to just receive these tones of light as they are meant for you, and you will get exactly what you need in this moment in time. Hey, na, hey, na, yeah. Hi, hey, na, yeah. So my hands immediately went to the circle as our sacred symbol. So know that the circle represents all things, all of life as a whole on this planet Earth, as well as everything else other than the human being that exists as a whole system that we get to work within. So just see that circle in front of you and imagine yourself somewhere on that circle of life. The Native American Indians talked about the medicine wheel in a circle pattern. with different spokes in the middle, like a wheel, a wheel on a car, or any kind of wheel that you would use. And we are all on a different pathway on that wheel to represent our different life paths that we get to take in our lives. So think of yourself as that being who has chosen to come here into human form, because I believe we all choose that. Whether it's conscious or not, we still choose it. And when we consciously choose our life path and we consciously choose empowerment, even in the midst of turmoil and struggle, things take on a new hue, if you will, of your life path. And Cheryl, you have a little story to tell us, don't you, about this very thing of empowerment in the midst of challenge and struggle and uncertainty.
I do. I appreciate the opportunity to share. So thank you for that. And you know, part of your introduction resonated with me on the circle aspect of it, because we all are here on the commonality of Earth and in human form. And I think that was probably one of my biggest lessons through my journey and through my story is the humanitarian thing. And there's so much in the world that wants to divide us. Whether it comes to country borders versus political versus other systems. And this was truly a story of seeing everybody as a united front and as one. And so in short, I was in the United States of America for 16 years in Arizona. I did not have a valid visa and permit to being there, and I own that 100%. And as a result, was detained by the United States Immigration Department for 295 days, 10 months, in what was alluded to recently and not that long ago as one of the Holocaust camps of the United States. My detainment was unexpected. Because typically they are not detaining people of my skin color. And I say that very tenderly because I found it to be we've heard a lot of talk about white privilege. We've heard a lot of talk about racism. And that definitely was very apparent when it hadn't necessarily been apparent in my world until that time. And so that was interesting to me. Being detained for 10 months, I signed my own deportation. I'm a Canadian by birth and happily came back across to my country, which is more than safe and more than livable. And I've been free now I'm just going to start my 5th year free. I've only been free for 4 years. In my detainment aspect, I learned a lot about the Hondurans and the Guatemalans and the Hispanics. And oftentimes I think that they're viewed as coming across to live the life of luxury in the United States and to take from that country. And my experience was absolutely 100%. 180 from that perception. And I'm grateful for that opportunity now. I wasn't at the time, but I'm grateful for that opportunity now, because I believe that sometimes I can share a different perception on it, having been in that facility with them and having been detained with them.
I see. So I have a question for you about
absolutely.
When you realized that how did the shift happen for you? So you knew that you were living in the United States without a visa, and then they found out. How did that work? So they just approached you, they called you, they emailed you, they stopped you in the store. What happened?
Great question. And only because I can be 100% transparent and honest that I had an accident in the United States with a very much expired license with no problems at all. Pay the fine, Miss Clark, and you're on your way. I also was blessed and privileged to foster a child from the Child and Protective Services in Arizona for the first 13 months of her life and passed her background check with no issues at all and had that baby awarded to me. There had been an incident in the facility near my home. And during that incident near the facility, they did ask for identification. And upon asking for identification at that point, even though they had different people had seen my identification all along. In that one particular incident, the gentleman that asked for the identification did detain me based on the fact that I couldn't prove I had been back and forth across our borders. And then from there, the detainment, it was right when the political party in power at that time in the United States had started what was then called the zero tolerance policy. And more often they were looking to detain those coming across the southern border. But due to the fact of the zero tolerance policy that was implemented, I got caught up in that as well as a couple of other folks did. So that's where the pickup happened. And then after that, there was no time where you were able to just say, okay, well, let me just go home and I'll work this out and I'll get back to you. There, you're literally at that point detained in belly chains, handcuffs, and ankle chains all the way.
Wow. Okay. That must have been quite a shock to your body system and your world. So we want to hear more about this journey, because I think from what I can tell of you just in the short time that I've known you, you are a resilient human being and one with incredible compassion and empathy for the world. And so that, I believe, has carried you in your life up to this point, and you have a message about the human spirit. And we want to hear more about that when we come back. Those of you who are listening who might be in a place of wondering if you've made the right choice in life, this is a story for you, because I'm sure from what I've gathered already that there were some choices that Cheryl made in her life that might not have been a conscious choice.
Exactly.
And we get to be really transparent in this show, as well as my invitation is to be transparent in your life, those of you who are listening. So when we come back, we're going to hear more about Cheryl's story and why she made the choices she made and what choices she made differently once she realized what was happening. So we'll be right back. You're listening to the Empower Me Show. Welcome back. I'm here. I'm Pam Bright, and I'm here with Cheryl Clark, who has an amazing story to tell us about her life as a Canadian, born and raised, I believe, and how she, through choices that she had made previously to now, found herself in a quandary of, okay, so what do I do now in my life? I'm here behind bars. I've got chains on me. What do I do from here? So how did that happen? You found yourself in an Arizona prison. Is that correct?
That's correct. And, funny enough, and only because I can, the terminology they use is detainment center, because they do try and make us feel like we are not necessarily prisoners, that we're just merely being detained. And they're very quick to correct the lingo on that aspect of it. But yes, I was in an Arizona detainment facility in a total no-flying zone in the middle of the desert. And there, at any given time, there's 1,500 people in this specific facility, immigration related wise. It is a for-profit facility based from the United States government. And so, yes, I did find myself in that facility. And the first couple of days, you're kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to be out of here any day now. And interestingly enough, I can remember a couple of the Hispanic girls gently saying, you're going to be here for a while. And you just fight back against that. I met folks that had been in that facility 5-6 years and remained in that facility, because at that point, some of them are truly fighting for their life. And that was probably the biggest learning curve for me, is hearing some of their stories. And oftentimes, some of them are also fighting for their families. Their families are on the American side. Some of the Hispanics, to share a couple of their stories, came across that southern border when they were 8 months old. They didn't necessarily consciously make the choice like I did. And so they came across that border at 8 months old. Wasn't born, but raised on the American side, had American-born children, took care of all of their family needs that way, and then all of a sudden, due to lack of papers, they also found themselves in that facility. And so all their children are on the American side, and they're risking being sent back to a country they don't know, they don't recognize, they didn't have any part of since they were young and children. Or at least I was coming back to a country I recognized and I still had connections in. And so that made it different.
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting when you start hearing, and some of those ladies, and when I say life and death, the Mexican cartel, the Sonora gangs, the corruption of the policing system down there is not just something for the movies. And I learned that very, very quickly as we were helping some of them fill out asylum forms and having their stories heard in hopes that they wouldn't get sent back, recognizing the fact that if they got sent back, their very life was in danger at that moment. And so it literally becomes a matter of life and death for a lot of them. And, you know, where we say that we're choices, I absolutely chose to be somewhere without the legalities that I needed. That being said, it's not like the legalities are a straight path and that you know how to get there and to make it happen. And that's a broken system that needs some reforming, just much like all the other systems that are out and prevalent in both of our countries at this point. But that being said, some of those ladies were coming across as a total matter of life and death due to the cartel, due to the living conditions, and due to being very tribal in nature. There's a simplistic humbleness about specifically the Guatemalan ladies that I came to love and appreciate beyond a doubt. And those folks that are coming, you know, from that far south, walking the 1,500 miles, to get up to a border in hopes of giving their children a better life. Because I can tell you, I didn't really meet anybody in that facility that whole time that was of an age coming across to better their own lives. They were literally coming across hoping to better the lives of their children. And so there's something to be said about how giving in nature they are, to sacrifice and to go through all of that in hopes of bettering the lives of those behind them.
Wow. So that says a lot about, especially about the indigenous folks and those of, you know, of a line of mentality where the ancestors matter, where our elders matter, where our, you know, our grandfathers and grandmothers and our aunts and our uncles, as well as our children, matter, right? So it's not just about me as an individual, it's about, what am I leaving my child? What am I furthering humanity with, right? So it sounds to me like let me ask you, so before this happened, did you have a connection to humanity as a greater whole other than you and your life?
I'd like to say yes, but I have to say no, only because I don't think my connection was as deep as it is now. I had always been doing what I'm doing now in the world when it comes to monetization and my business, which is helping entrepreneurs and business owners. However, when it comes to having a connection to the tribal folks and understanding some different cultures rather than just the American and Canadian culture, which is very similar, I'd have to say absolutely not. Was I compassionate? I'd like to say yes, I was compassionate. I fostered a baby for 13 months. Her mother was addicted to opiates. I mean, I had a lot of compassion for that kind of stuff, but not to the level of compassion and understanding I have now. And going on that, I'll share the one pivotal point that comes to mind, even when I'm having this conversation with you, is that, and please know that I'm not saying this from a standpoint of trying to justify my own being illegal and my own lack of action, but it comes from the standpoint of a poor choice, once handled, should be let go. And that's probably the biggest, strongest point that my heart resonates with now, is there's people that make choices that aren't necessary, that break the law, that aren't morally correct, that are not stand up when it comes to stand up humans and treating others with care and the love that they deserve. There's people that make those poor choices that necessarily move from those choices and better themselves and have an understanding of what they did. But oftentimes the world doesn't let them forget the bad choice that they made. And
I would say amen to that.
Yeah, that's where my mind shifted. And to the point where it's kind of like, where we see, I believe in you get what you deserve when it comes to the justice system. And I also believe in the justice system. I believe that there needs to be, a crime, there needs to be a punishment. A crime, there needs to be an opportunity to make it right. But that being said, oftentimes I find in my detainment side and in my what I now classify as my detainment brain, so oftentimes where we try and forgive ourselves for the mistakes we made, and we try and move ourselves from those mistakes, oftentimes others don't allow us that opportunity. The chains stay on us from others rather than the chains staying on us from the system and or from ourselves. And that was a huge learning curve for me, to just be able to stand up and say, you know what, I freed myself from this chain. And the government freed me from this chain. And if you don't free me, that's okay. I don't need the key because I can still walk.
Wow, that's a huge message right there. That's a huge message. I want to say, give a shout out actually to those people that feel like right now that they're in chains, right? Because that's a real feeling. That's a real reality for you. Maybe you are listening to this. Maybe you have the opportunity to listen to this because you actually are in chains and you are in a system, in the jail system, in the detainment center. I have no idea where this is actually going globally all over the world, but I know that this particular program is broadcast in a lot of places. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, I'm totally in chains. What do I do now? Right? Did you know that this right now in this second is your moment of choice? Right now, in the circumstances that you're in, what choice are you going to make? And it has nothing to do with what's actually happening out there. It has everything to do with your internal world and making a decision, A, that you're going to survive, B, that it's not the end of the world, and C, that you get to have a new experience in the circumstances that you're in. So that's my message at the moment. Thank you for that opening.
It's interesting.
What would you say is what was the turning point for you? Because I believe that often we have these experiences of trauma and abuse and whatever else we have, where we find ourselves in a predicament where we have to make a choice and we have to make a decision about something. So where was that turning point for you?
The turning point was recognizing that if I approach things, I won't say properly, if I approach things a certain way, I could control the reproach coming back my direction. And I could be a voice for others at that moment. And that was probably the biggest turning point for me, is I didn't have to let that facility change me. I didn't have to, but it did. And I had a choice on the change it made. And so rather than being angry, bitter, acting out, lashing out, resentful, I totally realized that because I was an educated white female, I recognized very quickly that I could be heard and I would be seen by people that were of the same genre as me, and therefore I could speak on others' behalf, let alone my own. And to be honest with you, Pam, the day they told me to leave, I didn't want to go, because in my mind, my work wasn't done there. And it broke my heart to leave. Where everybody else is excited to be free, I actually said to immigration, just give me a couple more days. I got things I got to get done.
Wow. Okay. So my question for you now is, okay, once you left, how are you continuing the reach out to others? What is your message and what are you doing?
Interesting when you talked. So first of all, a book is definitely probably in the works. And I've also bought the domain name, and I think that you'll appreciate this, called Led Me to This. because I believe that every step I've taken has led me to this moment. And every step I continue to take will lead me to the next. But I do have a very strong detainment group on Facebook of those coming out of Eloy and those that are out of Eloy. And I definitely have a presence in the Mexican community of those south of the border that have been deported, encouraging them to continue on, because life after detainment is just so very different. And so you get used to being in detainment where the decisions are made for you. And you get used to that regimented structure. And so therefore, when you come back out, it is very difficult to transition back into real life, when most of people would think that haven't been detained, oh, I'm free, like this is perfect, this is what you wanted. And quite often we have lost, it is June now, and we have lost 7 to suicide this year alone. Based on those coming out of detainment and not being able to transition back into real life. So I've been able to advocate with some of the groups that are helping those south of the border and those in detainment facilities to understand that that transition is really a bear.
Wow, that is such an important role that you're playing in the world, and it's very needed. And thank you for that. And there are many like you, it sounds like, that are, in this vein, just available. And I think, I recently had, actually, I think it was at the beginning of last year, or maybe it was at the end, I don't remember, but I had a gentleman on that had dealt with a lot of vets, and he was a vet himself. And so what that transition is like, and it's a real thing, guys. It's not pretend. They're not making it up. It's a real issue in the world of people that have had experiences where they don't have the support, they don't even know it exists, to really heal and recover from these experiences. And that's our message, is there are people available. There is a solution. You don't have to go through it alone, whatever your trauma has been. And that is what the Empower Me show is all about, is what are you going to do from here? Given that all of that happened to you in your life, whatever that is, now is the moment of choice. Even though you may not know what that looks like, now's the moment of choice. What choice do you want to make to move forward from here? So you got out of the detainment center and you realized, oh gosh, I have a lot to say. I have a lot to do. What were the first steps that you took?
Interestingly enough, I got out of the detainment center and thought I want to go back. And so literally you get used to detainment, and it's something that you have a hard time adjusting from. My very first night free, I literally slept in the Toronto downtown bus station. You're dropped across your border of entry with absolutely nothing, a backpack, all material possessions gone, car, house, books, photographs, laptop, cell phones, anything I owned. I literally came across the border with just a backpack. And so everything that everybody sees in my world right now is literally under 4 years old. And so when I first came back across, my very first reaction was to get connected to people that resonated home for me, because you don't have any connection with anybody for the 10 months that I was detained. And same as those ladies that have been in there for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, pleading their cases to the immigration. And so my first job was to feel grounded and connected. And that was really hard to do, because you just know that you can't cross back over, you can't see your material possessions. And that realization of everything being gone is just alarming at that point. And it took me, I will be transparent on this, it took me almost 2 years before I could have a conversation about it without the emotion. And then it took me another probably good year and a half before I was able to have it again. And interestingly enough, it's not my story that really impacts me emotionally. I'm good. I had a great support system of business owners down in the Arizona, Nevada areas and California areas that once they found me again up here via social media, rallied around me. And that was overwhelming too. Negative and positive can both be equally overwhelming. And I was overwhelmed to the positive side. And so I had those guys that totally rallied around me and were there for me when I was ready to start communicating again. And then I just honestly, much like some people, the addict, I don't differentiate from being an addict. The only difference is my drug of choice is small business and entrepreneurship. So that is my addiction. And so the very first thing that someone got me was a laptop, and I just got busy and got back to work and rebuilding what I had been doing on the southern side. And so therefore, when it comes to, a lot of people with the heroin addictions and the crack and the cocaine addictions, I get it because I'm no different than them. I just choose a healthier drug. And the small business happens to be my drug of choice. And so I honestly just dove right into that. And for the longest time, did my best because I was out. And so many of my friends then were still detained. And I'm glad you brought up the vet aspect. The trauma bonds are huge. And some people, we will always be bonded, those that were detained in that same facility, because we know the sounds, we know the stories, we know the experiences. And I've even watched, there's hundreds of us out now that have been through that facility since in the 4 years. And when one of them needs something, there's one cry for help and there's 100 people answering it based on the bonds that are formed in those facilities. And or when it comes to war and vets and stuff like that, the bonds are very real and very deep. And that's something that I can't explain. And I've never seen anybody else do a great job of explaining it either. But literally when I came back from that aspect, then I knew that there was still some folks in there that needed some stuff that I could get them on this side of the border, as in paperwork to help them with their cases, pictures of their children, to encourage them to continue going on, sent through the mail system, pictures, phone calls to their family members to say, hey, I was there with them and they are okay, because it gets very expensive to make any kind of contact with the outside world. And a lot of them didn't have what they needed. And going back to the tribal aspect of it, we're holding some of those folks to a standard that they can't meet. When it comes to the paperwork, the doctor's notes, the police reports that you're at risk in your countries. They don't have those kind of things in those southern countries and south of the border. And yet here we are saying, well, we'll let you in if you can provide these. And they have no way of providing that. And you definitely don't have any way of providing that while you're detained. So my very first 6 months, I can't even tell you how much money I spent in postage and getting those ladies some of the stuff that I knew they needed based on my experience with them and understanding their cases, and a lot of pictures of their family, because it was just like, you're doing this for them, continue to fight.
That's excellent. That's so excellent. So you brought up a really good point that I want to share with folks that may not have an understanding or even an idea about really kind of how broken the systems are in the world. I got aware of this when COVID hit pretty strongly, that like the systems have been broken for a very long time, folks, in our world, okay? And we have been trying to get by with broken systems that don't interact with each other. And it really is all across the board, right? If we're playing a board game, it's all across the entire board of the world. So it's not our fault, first of all. Let's just get really honest about that. It's not our fault. Collectively, we've been doing the best we can as humanity, right? Many of us would say we've been dropped here as humans. I happen to have a different belief about that as soul, we chose to be here. Okay. You don't have to believe that yourself, but I believe that myself, and I stand to that. And I still have to take care of my human self. Okay. And the choices that I make individually, as well as how I interact with other people on this planet. So that's my responsibility to be here in a body. So think about that. What is your responsibility in your life and what the choices you make? Are you coming from a place of self-care and of the heart, or are you reacting to circumstances and everybody else's stuff and just reacting to the broken systems. So which are you choosing? Because that's going to dictate kind of what your course in life is. So given that we know that the systems are broken, Cheryl, what message would you give to those that are listening to assist themselves in empowering themselves?
I believe the systems were probably put in place with the understanding of betterment. But that being said, they're not evaluated often enough, and they're not individualized. And therefore, we become part of a collective group before we know it. And so my advice would be to understand from your own shoes, and make your choices from there on what you believe and what you don't believe, and what resonates with you and what doesn't resonate with you, rather than being part of a collective system that has absolutely maybe necessarily no experience, but you're just believing it because they said. And so that's where that would be the biggest words for me, is base it on your own experience, your own truth, rather than the collective experience of what they said, because oftentimes they don't know either. They haven't experienced it. They've just made decisions that they think is good for the overall, and based on their limited perception. And that becomes huge. And, it's interesting that, a quick little story, but each week, each judge, the wording in the immigration facility is literally, it's up to the discernment of the court. Key word, discernment. One judge would say, yes, your asylum case is awarded. The next judge reading the exact same case could say, no, it's not. And so therefore, there is no standardization in it. Therefore, it's hard for folks to know how to navigate it. But that being said, it also is very difficult because, again, that judge has never experienced someone threatening their life because they refuse to sell cocaine today, or someone threatening their life for extortion because they know that their father has a good paying job and they want the money, or someone who literally, I met a lady whose feet were torched so that she couldn't run from those abusing her. And so someone's never experienced that. And so it's all about the human experience 100% and what the body can feel, but it's also 100% until you've been there and until you have tried to put yourself in their shoes or have empathy for them. You're basing your experience, you're basing your judgment on what the collective wants you rather than on your own individualized stories.
Yes, I absolutely. I really believe that. And so because we are the Empower Me show, we are always going to go back to what can you do in this moment to, like, if you're, take the lenses off that you're currently wearing that have a certain view of whatever you're looking at, and maybe put a new pair on, or take them off completely so that you can see something different, right? In Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a book called A New Pair of Glasses, and it's written by one of the what we call the old timers, which were the first ones of Alcoholics Anonymous, who wrote books to teach us how to live differently. And so when we put a new pair of glasses on, we get to have a new perspective, right, of what we're seeing. And what we're seeing may not be what someone else is seeing. So allow other people to teach you, to teach me, to teach us what they are going through, because that's where we get to learn compassion. That's where we get to be in a community, because we're all in it together, folks. No matter how long we are in a body, we're still here, right? And since we're all in a body, your body, my body, our body, let's do it together. Let's learn from each other, right? So, Cheryl, what have you taken? What's the biggest thing that you've taken from this experience? You went from, oh, okay. So what was it actually? I'm curious, what was it that brought you from Canada to Arizona in the first place?
Love. There's no point in lying about that. 100% love. And I mean, great place to live, beautiful state, met some amazing people on my journey. And so 100% that way. It was definitely a love. And Canadians are allowed 180 calendar days per year down there legally with no issues. I just never came back home once I got down there. Fell in love with the state, fell in love with some humans, and the rest is history in that regard.
Okay.
So definitely love.
Okay, great. So, our hearts will lead us wherever we want to be, right? And sometimes we make choices that aren't necessarily from our brains. We don't think it through, right? How many times have you, the listener, took some actions that you didn't think through, right? I would say forgive yourself for that. Forgive yourself. So what was that point, Cheryl, where you forgave yourself for making the decision to not get a visa to come to Arizona?
Interesting question. I'm not sure I needed forgiveness. And I'm not trying to push back on the thought process. I'm just not sure I needed forgiveness. It was just part of the journey. I don't look at any of it as negative or positive. First of all, I think we tie the emotion to the actions. And I take full responsibility for that. And it kind of, when you were talking about the story aspect of it and us having to understand other people's journeys and stuff, I learned very quickly that their story doesn't have to impact me. As in their choices don't necessarily have to impact me. If they're crossing that border illegally, why doesn't it doesn't impact me? If they're running for their dear lives, from a humanitarian standpoint, I'd hope I'd help them. But down deep, it really doesn't impact me. And I tell you, probably one of the quotes that carried me through a lot of that, and especially when there's a lot of drugs and drug paraphernalia and that kind of stuff in detainment jail facilities, was see the light in others and treat them as that all you see by Wayne Dyer. Because literally it's kind of like, you know what, you may be angry, you may be acting out, you may be someone who's hard and hostile in the cell block, et cetera, but dang it, there's something in there that's triggered you to do that. That's your way of protecting yourself. And I know you to be better. And I know you to be something different. And that really, and even to this day, holds me in looking at folks with a different light. Even if I don't resonate with their behaviors, even if I think that they tend to be curt and rude, even if I, don't like some of their choices, it's their choices. Their choices does not have to impact me, and I won't allow it to. But also, there's light inside them, and I think we need to see that. And that became huge for me. I had someone message me just the other day that she had seen someone that was obviously strung out on some kind of street paraphernalia, and had used the words, that person has given up. And my response back was, no, she hasn't. Because if she has given up, she would have been suicidal and she would have ended her life. While they're still doing the drugs and while they're still addicted to the drugs and while they're still on the street, they haven't given up yet. And I pushed back very quickly on that, because it goes back to that, what we had just shared, that they made a poor choice. They made a poor decision. We don't need to put the chains on them. They've put the chains on themselves. And once they free themselves, dang it, then we need to take our chains off them too.
I love that.
That's the biggest thing for me coming out of this, is just seeing folks with a different aspect, but also recognizing that I don't have to absorb any of the energy I don't want to take in. And I don't have to be part of anything I don't necessarily want to be part of. And going to your theme of your show, the empowerment thing, it's not that I stand in my own empowerment and build a bubble around myself, because there absolutely is stuff that still bounces in and out and that I feel. But by the same token, I can choose what bounces in and out and what I do feel. And people are not necessarily their choices. Their choices definitely do make them, but it's a moment. Your choice is just that quick, and the ripple effect of that choice can linger on and on and on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we do what we know.
That's true. That's very true. And in every moment we can choose differently, right? In that moment, we can make a different choice and a different choice and a different choice and a different choice. How many times have I reinvented myself? Even in a day, right?
Yeah.
Even in the moment, like, wait a minute, that thought just came in. Wait, do I want to have that thought? No, not necessarily. Okay, what other thought can I have? Right? It can really be that simple, guys. In this moment, this is the moment of power. Right this second, this is the moment of power. And now, and now, and now, and now.
Exactly.
Right?
It's like I didn't like what I did this moment, but now I'm in a new moment. So this moment's gone. So now I'm in a new moment. Let's just keep moving forward that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what is it now that it's how long since then?
4 years I've been
later.
home.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you doing now in your life?
In my life, I have a great life. I have amazing friends. The internet has kept me connected to a lot of folks that have been part of my world and part of my life 10, 15, 20 years. My full-time passion is networking and building communities centered around entrepreneurs and business owners, and supporting them on their journey strategically. With tools that help them move forward. And then I also have obviously a huge passion for the Hispanic community. I stay in touch and very much part of that world in understanding exactly what's going on, how I can better support them, those that are looking to still be reunited with their families, because there's still, even 4 years later, people on the southern side of the border and their children and stuff are still in the US. And so helping them make those connections and supporting them in starting and firing up their lives again. I was blessed to come home to a country I knew and where I knew people, where other people are being placed on the street with no home and no shelter, let alone food or any means of providing themselves with a livelihood right away. And so that's where that transition from detainment to real life again becomes really a struggle for some of them, because you literally are placed on the street unless you have the connections to support you through it.
Okay. So for those that might be in that predicament, that have the blessing of being able to hear the internet and being able to hear this broadcast and need support, how do they get connected with you and your work?
So my work on the detainment side is probably more under my own personal umbrella, but they can absolutely 100% email me or at team@clarkstrategies.ca, and or a lot of them on the Mexican side do have the apps for WhatsApp. And my WhatsApp number would be 905-598-8444. A lot of us communicate through the WhatsApp channel just because it's free and easy to use rather than crossing two borders to be able to communicate.
Wonderful. Yay. Awesome. So that is so great. So we do have a few minutes left. What would you say, 3 to 5 step inspirational message for, where do I go from here? Wherever somebody's at, where do I go from here forward so that I can take hold of my life, make a life that I can be proud of, a life where I'm not a victim. How do we make that transition easily and effortlessly, simply by a statement?
If others choose to hold your past against you, that is their choice. It does not have to be yours. Would be my first one. I have been told, by people trying to deframe my character, you are dealing with a criminal. 100% I am a criminal. I broke federal law. And so literally, if people choose to hold your past against you, that is their choice. It does not have to be yours. And let them have their choice, just like you have your choices. And if you're ashamed of your past, that's okay too. Be ashamed of it, but you're not there anymore. Recognize where you are now. You're not back there. You're moving forward. And just by even, every simple breath in is a new minute, a new moment. And so recognizing that even if you are ashamed of your past, you're in a new moment now. And if you're not surrounded with a circle that recognizes that the past is the past and you are ready to move forward, change your circle. because that can be and or make your own circle and stand firm in yourself and who you are. You are still here for a reason. And I firmly believe that we all have a choice to exit. And if you have not exited, there's a reason why you have not. So grab onto that and run with it. And even if you don't understand it, even if you don't understand your reason for not exiting, recognize that you are still here. There has to be a reason, and keep going until you figure that out.
I love that. Absolutely. And folks, this is why I'm here as your host, is that I firmly believe that as well. This moment right now is your moment of truth, your moment of power. So if you have up to this point have not felt like you had a choice, and you want somebody to support you, and you don't have anybody in your life like that, guess what? You can call me. You can email me. You can contact Cheryl, and she will be your cheerleader and your advocate in your life to make new pathways so that you can have a life of empowerment, a life of power, a life of bliss, a life of happiness and joy. Because we don't have to suffer, even though we might have in the past. Right now, you can take a breath. As I've mentioned, we start with the breath. We start with centering. We allow ourselves to breathe into the center of ourselves, and then we look up. Look up and ask for help. Look around you and say, please help. What can I give today? That's another power play of choice. What can I give? What can I give? Allow yourself to give, allow yourself to receive, allow yourself to know that you are here for a reason, that your path is right in front of you. So grab onto it, allow your feet to take you, even if you don't know where you're going yet. We absolutely love you, and we are here for you. Check out clarkstrategies.ca. Is that right?
That is correct, 100%.
And you can get a hold of Cheryl. You can get a hold of me at brightbutterflyenterprises.com, or you can reach out to me at theempowermeshow@gmail.com. And if you want to be a special guest on this show, I would be more than happy to talk to you. I've got a lot of folks that come on this show, and they have their own stories to tell, because they have their own unique way of receiving information and giving information and allowing you to be empowered in whatever way you can receive it. So that's what this is all about, folks. We love you, and we adore this opportunity to be able to share together. And we're building community here. So if you want to reach out and build community with us, you know where to find us. And have an amazing, amazing day, and know that today you matter. So thank you for tuning in. Next week, we will be here as well, and I will have my next special guest. And at the moment, it's not in my consciousness as to who it is, because I've had so many of you connect in with me. But every week now, we're going to have a special guest who's going to have amazing information for you to empower your life. So be well and know that you are loved. Bye-bye now.
Thank you for listening to the Empower Me Show with Pam Bright on Transformation Talk Radio. Tune in to learn more about living a fully empowered life. Remember that your life is up to you, and you can choose the spiritual path you are on. There is spiritual energy and wisdom in everything and everyone around you. Listen carefully for what the universe is trying to tell you in every moment. You are already being guided along your journey. Call upon your spirit guides anytime you need help with anything. Know that you are safe in every moment, even if it seems that you are not. For more information about Pam Bright, visit brightbutterflyenterprises.com or email theempowermeshow@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening. We hope to see you next week.